This is iMathit with Samuel Oke. This channel is dedicated to helping young mathematicians reach their full potential as soon as possible. And in this lesson, we will be looking into an essential concept in mathematics, an important aspect of mathematics, and that is complex number. You probably have come by the square root of -1 before, probably in quadratic or somewhere. And the square root of -1 is written as I, imaginary, or J, or K sometimes in complex analysis. So when you see the letter I in mathematics, or letter J or K in an expression, it really represents the square root of -1. Generally, complex numbers are usually written in the form A plus IB, imaginary B, where A is the real part of the complex number and the IB is the imaginary part. You should know this as well. In this lesson, we are going to look into different important knowledge that we need to have in dealing with complex number. We will see problems on the power of I and the negative power of I as well. Look, for example, say you have x raised to the power 2 plus 1. If you had to solve this quadratic equation, subtracting 1 from both sides, you have x raised to the power 2 equals -1, right? And when you square root both sides, you have the s equals square root of -1, right? Plus or minus. So you say s equals positive square root of -1 or negative square root of -1. So this can be written as the I, imaginary, or negative I. Okay? So, and this is an example of a situation where we come by complex number. It is more common that we come by something like this when we are solving quadratic equation. Well, look at this. So we have the square root of -36. You will agree this can be split into the square root of -1 multiplied by 36, where 36 is 6 multiplied by 6. So this would be the square root of -1 multiplied by square root of 6 and multiplied by square root of 6. That would be square root of -1 multiplied by 6, right? So, and where square root of -1 is imaginary, so you have imaginary 6, right? I6. And that is the value of the square root of -36. So, this as area in mathematics allow us to study complex numbers and know how to manipulate them. Please, if you get value from this lesson, remember to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more educational content like this. Now let's look briefly into the power of I. So I can have power 1. What is I raised to power 1? What would that be? I raised to power 1 is I, right? Good. But what is I raised to power 2? I raised to power 2 will be I multiplied by I, where I is square root of -1, right? So what would be the square root of -1 multiplied by the square root of -1? So that would be -1, right? Good. So what of I raised to power 3? So that would be I multiplied by I and multiplied by I, right? 3 times, right? So, and that would be the square root of -1 multiplied by itself 3 times, right? Okay, then what would that be? So the first two, the I squared is -1. So I multiplied by I, right? Because square root of -1, the third square root of -1 will still be I. So that simply is going to be -I, right? So what of I raised to power 4? So, and that will be, you agree that it's going to be I raised to power 2 multiplied by I raised to power 2, where I raised to power 2 equals -1. And -1 multiplied by -1 equals +1, right? Now let's see I raised to power 5, I to the power of 5. So you know that's simply going to be I raised to power 4 and multiplied by I. And I raised to power 4 is 1 and multiplied by I. That is going to be I. And this is the power of I. We can kind of memorize it. I raised to power 1 is I raised to power 2 is -I raised to power 3 is -I raised to power 4 is 1. So now let's see the power of negative I. So here we have square root I raised to power negative 1, right? From indices, that is going to be 1 all over I, right? And that's that. But what of I raised to power negative 2? So you know that it's going to be 1 all over I raised to power 2 from indices. Because when you have something having a negative power, it's going to be equal to 1 all over the value with positive power, right? So that will be negative 1, right? And I raised to power 3 is going to be 1 all over I raised to power 3, which is I times I times I. Remember from the other time, I raised to power 3 is negative I, right? I raised to power 2 is 1, right? I raised to power 2, is negative 1. So what of I raised to power negative 4? That is going to be 1 and all over I raised to power 2 multiplied by I raised to power 2. I raised to power 2 is negative 1. So that will be 1 all over 1 altogether, which is 1. What of I raised to power 5? You'll notice this will bring us back to the original result. You can check through all this on your own so that you remember them. In subsequent lesson, we will see how we can change complex number from one form to another and other basic calculations. Well, until next time, keep mathing it and keep winning.